Morning unfolding on Capitol Hill. Today is the sequel to last week's dramatic James Comey testimony. Today, top Justice Department officials are in the hot seat on two important hearings, and we're going to take you through that and figure out what we need to know, what's important and what is not. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in America's Newsroom. Here we go, Shannon, again.
Yes.
How are you?
There is a lot of information for us to sift through, but we're going to do it as you said. I'm Shannon Bream. Just an hour from now, the man heading up the Russia investigation, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, faces a Senate committee. Hours later, his boss, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, testifies in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, both expected to face sharp questions on the Russia investigation and the firing of former FBI Director James Comey.
So we have Team Fox coverage this morning. John Roberts live at the White House. Senate Intelligence Committee member James Lankford is here live in a moment. But first, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge begins our coverage back in that hearing room on Capitol Hill. And Catherine, what will happen today?
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. Our expectation is that the Attorney General Jeff Sessions will address at least two key issues that were raised during last week's testimony from the fired FBI Director James Comey. The first takes us back to mid-February of this year and this discussion between Comey and President Trump about former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. You'll recall that based on that meeting, Comey testified that the president told him he hoped he would let go of the Flynn investigation. Mr. Trump has disputed the characterization of Comey's testimony, but in any event, Comey said that he did not take the matter to his boss, the Attorney General, because Comey had either evidence or intelligence that told him that soon the Attorney General would take himself out of the Russia investigation over his contacts with the Russians.
When it comes from the president, I took it as a direction to get rid of this investigation because we're not going to follow that request. And so we decided we got to keep it away from our troops. But is there anybody else we ought to tell at the Justice Department? And as I laid out in my statement, we considered whether to tell the Attorney General, decided that didn't make sense because we believed, rightly, that he was shortly going to recuse.
We can expect lawmakers to press the Attorney General on the number of contacts he had with the Russians and whether it goes beyond the two he has already declared in the summer of last year as well as September. The second key issue is what role the Attorney General played in the firing of FBI Director James Comey. So Sessions had taken himself out of the Russia case. The president indicated that the firing, or Comey indicated he believed he was fired over the Russia case. So what role exactly did Sessions play in that event?
I think it's a reasonable question. If, as the president said, I was fired because of the Russia investigation, why was the Attorney General involved in that chain? I don't know. And so I don't have an answer for the question.
Sessions supporters say that he will be testifying publicly today as a way to set the record straight after Comey's testimony last week. And just about an hour from now, we will hear from the Deputy Attorney General. This would typically be a routine funding hearing on Capitol Hill, but we do expect the questions to turn to Russia, Bill.
Nothing's routine, right?
That's correct.
Rosenstein and especially Sessions have an opportunity here to set the record straight. So we're waiting on all that. Thanks, Catherine Herridge there on Capitol Hill. Shannon.
All right, let's bring in one of the lawmakers who's going to ask those questions today on the Hill, Senator James Lankford, Senate Intelligence Committee member. And, sir, thank you for your time today. I want to make sure to save plenty of time for a religious freedom issue that is critical, that's getting lost in some of these headlines. But to the headlines first, what will be your question? What is your key inquiry you have for Senator Jeff Sessions, former senator, now AJ?
Sure, now Attorney General, there's really three issues that have come up. One is that did he have any conversations with Russians? The accusation has been there that at that time Senator Sessions, anytime he met with, was in a room with, passed by a Russian leader or the Russian ambassador, that should be brought up for a questioning. Quite frankly, that's a little absurd to say if there was any conversation, any passing. Was there any planning or collusion? Obviously, that's a legitimate issue. Was there any just passing conversations? Senators have passing conversations with people all the time. What was his role in the firing of James Comey? Was there any Russia connection to that directly is an obvious question. And the departure of James Comey, of anything that happened during that time period as well. All of those are pertinent questions to be able to get the full facts out, and I'm glad Jeff is coming to be able to lay some of those things out, because quite frankly, the Attorney General was around some of those things. He can clear the whole thing up by getting a chance to lay out those conversations.
What about the representations that the former FBI director made last week, that he actually expressed concern saying, don't leave me alone with the president, those kinds of things? Will you probe those conversations as well?
That should be probed. quite frankly, when that came out, I thought that was an odd statement for Jim Comey to make because it leaves the impression that Sessions was trying to. Sessions was in the room waiting with Comey when the president said he wanted Comey to stay. So Sessions did exactly what he should have done as his boss, Bill remained as well, and the president asked everyone else to leave but Comey. That's not a position that Jeff Sessions can say to the president, no, I'm going to stay. And so I understand it. I'm waiting to be able to see what Jeff Sessions comes back to that. But Jeff is not going to be able to say to Comey, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to leave you alone with the president. If the president says he wants to meet alone with somebody, you're going to allow the president to be able to meet with someone alone. So that's not the issue. And this whole conversation about this was Russia related, it seemed fairly apparent from Comey's testimony last week that the president asked him 3 times to say publicly what he said privately, and Comey refused to say, you're not under investigation publicly. He would only say it privately to the president. And then at some point, apparently the president said, I'm going to move on. Now, that's not really Russia related in the sense that he's trying to quash the investigation, but it seemed to be a frustration of the president that Comey will say one thing privately and another thing not say publicly. So we'll allow this all to come out.
All right, I want to turn to a hearing last week that didn't get much attention because of all the other big headlines that we have. This involves Senator Sanders questioning somebody who is a nominee for Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget, really pushing him on his Christian faith and what that means to his ability to serve in a government position. Here's a bit of their interchange.
Are you suggesting that all of those people stand condemned? What about Jews? They stand condemned too?
Senator, I'm a Christian.
I understand you are a Christian, but this country is made up of people who are not just. I understand that Christianity is the majority religion, but there are other people who have different religions in this country and around the world.
And Senator Senator Sanders there said this is not the kind of guy that we want serving in our government. What did you make of that dust-up?
Yeah, that was a pretty chilling statement from Senator Sanders to say basically this person's not qualified to be able to serve in government. Article 6 of the Constitution says there's no religious test and there's no qualification for any officer or any person serving in the public trust. That can't be required to say, I want to know more about your religion before you get into this public setting. The person that he was actually interviewing is being nominated is for an accounting role within the Office of Management and Budget and an economic role. But basically Senator Sanders was saying, I know you're applying for some of the economics, but because you're a Christian, that you can't also then serve in government. The teachings of it that he was trying to say, and all he was trying to quote was John 3:18. So the implication is you can be a Christian and serve in government as long as you don't believe in the teachings of Jesus. And those two things are inconsistent.
Quickly, should he apologize or resign?
No, Sanders should not. He should apologize, but he shouldn't resign. Again, that would be putting a religious test the other direction to say that you're opposed to a certain religion. He should apologize to him, and he should just make a clear statement. I'm not trying to put a religious test on people. People can believe what they want to believe in their faith. That doesn't preclude them from also serving in government.
All right, Senator Langford will be watching the hearings this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Amid all the hearings, certainly the White House now firing back against a report that President Trump was considering firing Special Counsel Robert Mueller. What about that this morning? Chief White House correspondent John Roberts running that down on the North Lawn now. John, what'd you find out? Good morning.
What about all of that? Good morning to you, Bill. You might have read a lot of stories this morning about the president considering firing the special counsel Robert Mueller because he doesn't like what's going on. It is the lead story of today's New York Times. It is the front page of the LA Times. There is outrage from Democrats. Congressman Adam Schiff saying if the president were to fire Mueller, then Congress would immediately resurrect the Independent Counsel Act and reappoint Mueller. It all seems very horrible this morning, except for the fact, and it's a very sticky fact, that it's apparently not true. All of this reporting and all of this outrage was based on a statement that a friend of the president's, Chris Ruddy, the CEO of Newsmax, made on PBS last night. Listen here.
I think he's considering perhaps terminating the special counsel. I think he's weighing that option. I think it's pretty clear by what one of his lawyers said on television recently.
Now, a lot of people thought that because Chris Ruddy is a friend of the president's, he was speaking to the president about it and hid inside information. But sources close to Trump's legal team tell me that Ruddy's statement was based on watching Jay Sekulow from the American Council for Law and Justice on ABC's program This Week on Sunday, in which Sekulow never said any such thing. Listen to this exchange here.
And finally, will the president promise not to interfere, not attempt at any time to order the Deputy Attorney General to fire Robert Mueller?
Look, the president of the United States, as we all know, is a unitary executive. But the president is going to seek the advice of his counsel, and inside the government as well as outside. And I'm not going to speculate on what he will or will not do. But right now, the role of the president is to govern the United States of America. He's going to do that. He's going to leave anything else to the lawyers. But I can't imagine that issue is going to arise.
Sekulow did go on to say that it's something the president might consider talking with his attorneys about, quote, if there was a basis. But it's a huge leap from that to he's considering firing Robert Mueller. So we'll see where the news coverage goes from here. Certainly the president would like an apology for all of the coverage surrounding this, tweeting out just a short time ago, quote, fake news is at an all-time high. Where is their apology to me for all of the incorrect stories? And the president firing a preemptive strike against Jeff Sessions' testimony this afternoon, reminding people in a tweet, quote, Attorney General Lynch made law enforcement decisions for political purposes, gave Hillary Clinton a free pass and protection, totally illegal. The president will be winging his way to Waukesha, Wisconsin, at the same time as Attorney General is testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee. I imagine, though, Bill, he'll likely watch a little bit of that on Air Force One.
We will see then. Thank you, John. A lot going on there. Thank you, John Roberts from the White House. Shannon, what's coming up here?
We will have more on all of these developing stories throughout this hour. Still ahead, former Attorney General Michael Mukasey, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and Senator Rand Paul. And later this afternoon, please join us for a special edition of America's Newsroom for live coverage of the Jeff Sessions hearing. The Attorney General there taking the podium, and we will start and kick that off at 2 p.m. today.
Nothing going on. That's not the only matter today. President Trump focusing on repealing Obamacare and calling out Democrats in the process when he said this.
We will have zero backing from the Democrats, even though they should get in and do something, but we expect to get zero.
So are we getting closer to getting a bill passed in the Senate? House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is live on that a moment away here.
And former NBA star Dennis Rodman heading back to North Korea again. The motives behind the trip?
Back to our top story, too. AG Jeff Sessions before the committee today. Yesterday, Judge Napolitano said on our program that he had some big concerns about that happening. So how does he feel about this today?
This is a very dangerous position for him to be in.
How come?
He is not testifying as the chief law enforcement officer in the land, as the Attorney General. He's testifying as a witness because he doesn't run the Russia investigations.
Excuse me, are you Johnny Bench?
Yes.
Would you mind signing?
For the strength and energy to get back to doing what you love. Ensure, always be you.
It depends on the scope of the questions, and it would be to get into a hypothetical at this point would be premature.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer responding to a question about whether or not President Trump will invoke an executive privilege to curtail the AG Jeff Sessions testimony. Based on everything we know, that's not going to happen. The hearing will go forward. Judge Mike Mukasey, former Attorney General, and President George W. Bush with me in studio, and been waiting for a while to talk to you. So thank you for your time today on what is a very important day. Just analyze this from Jeff Sessions' position. What is the opportunity for him today?
I think the opportunity for him is to clear up a couple of misconceptions and distortions, if you will, about what he's said and done in the past. Starting with the number of times that he had encounters with the Soviet ambassador, with the Russian ambassador, excuse me. He was asked during his confirmation hearing in a question that mentioned people acting as surrogates who had contact with the Russian ambassador, whether he had had a contact with the Russian ambassador. That was the context of the question. There was no reason for him at that point to recall this other meeting that he had in his office that was set up, by the way, by the Obama State Department. It was one of about 20 or 30 meetings that they arranged with foreign diplomats, including the Russian ambassador, including many others.
Among the incoming administration. May I pause you there for a moment? Because at this confirmation hearing, January 10th, right? You were there,
yes.
And this is how the answer came out after the question.
I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians.
Now, what is the distinction in that answer? I was a surrogate for the campaign.
That refers to the question, the way Senator Franken asked it. He asked about people who acted as surrogates for the president having contact with the Russians. And so he said, well, I was called a surrogate, but I didn't have contact with the Russians. There was no reason for him at that point to have remembered a conversation that he had when he was in his office that had been set up by the Obama State Department, that they set up because he was a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Two meetings, correct, with this Russian ambassador?
As far as I know, meetings in the sense of sitting down and having a substantive conversation, as far as I know, one. In his office, right. He had other encounters with the Russian ambassador where they run into each other at a speech. The guy comes over to him and says, hello. You call that a meeting? I don't.
What's the downside to his appearance today?
The downside to his appearance is people trying to push him into a situation where he has to invoke executive privilege so that he looks like he's hiding something, I guess. I don't know of any other downside. I certainly don't know of any downside from the standpoint of asking him what he did. I know he's based on conversations with people who've spoken to him, I know he is eager to testify. I know he's eager to clear up some misconceptions. Another one, by the way, has to do with why he recused himself. He didn't recuse himself over the Russia investigation. He recused himself because there is a section of the administrative code that speaks about people who work on campaigns should not be involved later in decisions about whether people acted properly in those campaigns or not. He did work on the Trump campaign.
So you're saying he can explain that away?
Correct.
Did he want to testify today, or did his boss, President Trump, want him there today?
I don't know what President Trump wants or doesn't want. I know, based on a conversation with somebody who spoke to him about it, that he definitely wanted to testify. And wanted to testify in open session.
You are a professional colleague of his.
Yes.
You've had contact with him.
Right.
What is the crime here?
The crime where? Seriously, I don't see evidence of any crime having been committed by anybody in relation to this this investigation.
Was
the only crime was committed by the Russians when they hacked into the Democrats' emails and disclosed them. That was the crime, and that was complete when the Russians did it.
Was there obstruction that you have found?
Based on what I've seen, no. There's no obstruction of any investigation.
Is there collusion in this case?
No, there was. As far as I can tell, nobody's found any evidence of collusion, and if there were, it wouldn't be a crime.
If that is the case on those three questions, with your answers, where is this going?
You'd have to ask the senators who are doing it, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere productive.
Thank you for your time. We're waiting 40 minutes away from the next hearing. Thank you, sir. Mike McCasey, former AG.
And we're getting word of a deadly attack at a Georgia prison. Officials say inmates killed 2 guards and then escaped. It happened during a bus transport this morning. We are following the very latest developments. That manhunt is now underway. And the Russia investigation pushing much of President Trump's agenda to the back seat. One of his main priorities, repealing and replacing Obamacare, still front and center for many lawmakers. The House passed its version. The White House still waiting for the Senate to act.
I'm worried that the outline has a lot of Obamacare in it. If it's Obamacare light, that'll be difficult for me.
Performance. It's in every...
Ding. Hey guys. Home Quote Explorer. It's home insurance made easy.
Password is hey guys.
Fox News alert now, 25 past. There's a new report that shows Obamacare enrollment is declining. It shows 2 million more Americans have dropped out. And now the House, you remember, passed a version of a new bill about 5 weeks ago. The action now is in the Senate. Earlier today, I talked to Republican Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy about all this. Kevin McCarthy, thank you for your time. Good morning.
Well, thanks for having me on today.
We've got a lot to get to here, but on this Russia matter, what is that doing to the progress in the House?
Well, in the House, if you look at what's gone on, we've passed 158 bills. That's the most bills of any first new president coming in since H.W. Bush, even larger than his. And signed into law 37 bills. So yes, there is distraction, but it's not if you take merits of what's happened here in the House and the number of bills signed. This is the most, all the way back to H.W. Bush.
So you're saying it's not getting in the way?
It's not getting in the way, but some things are happening. If you watched last week while we're passing the Choice Act that actually helps more capital, creates more jobs, community banks. At the same time, they're covering the Comey hearing, and no one's talking about what's happening here in the House. Today, we're going to pass the VA accountability bill. How many people are going to watch that? Actually change the VA. We have a lot of great employees over at the VA caring for our veterans, but we also have some bad ones.
Yeah, let me.
And we're not able to get not able to get rid of them.
It's a very important topic, and it's the reason you came on today. Let me get to that in a moment here, but I want to play this for our viewers from yesterday. During this, I guess you'd call it a board meeting, cabinet meeting, where the president said this about your colleagues on the Democratic side.
If we had the greatest bill in the history of the world on health care, we wouldn't get one vote from the Democrats because they're obstructionists. That's what they want to do. That's the game. They think that's their best political game.
And that's been the message from the White House for a week now. Are they obstructionists?
Well, it's not just for a week. Remember, this president, it was the longest time ever to get a cabinet since George Washington. No president has ever had to wait this long. In the Senate, where the Democrats actually run this clock out, they even resisted back in May to having committee hearings in the afternoon. So they are using every stall tactic possible to try to make this president not successful.
But I remind you have the majority.
We do have the majority, and if you look in the House, we passed more bills than any other time. Going forward, more than 158. He has signed more, twice as many as President Obama in the first 100 days, more so than Bush, more so than Clinton, more so than H.W. Bush. So we have had some success, but in the Senate there are different rules. And unfortunately, those stall tactics, because the Senate has to be confirmations, and there's 1,200 positions that have to be confirmed with a new administration. And what Schumer is doing is stalling it out. What did Schumer do yesterday? He took the time to take his staff and try to mock the president for having a cabinet hearing. Is that really the best use of the minority leader over there? Or can he be working to make sure what we continue to hear of the millions of Americans who are now not going to have health care because the exchanges have collapsed? 94 out of 99 counties in Iowa will not have health care. We just got a new CMS study that shows, 2 million people who signed up for Obamacare are not paying in. Why? Because the premiums have come too high. That's 19 million people take in the penalty or the waiver, and only 10 million have signed up to Obamacare. This is collapsing upon itself. I think it's time to work together, to find common ground, and actually have a solution for America.
It's significant what's happening in the Senate. You mentioned the VA. This is very important. You'll put a reform bill before today. What will that do for the veterans who need that help?
Well, this is so critical. This is a bill that we passed in 2015. We passed last Congress. Finally, we got it through the Senate to come back to us. If you look at the history, there are great employees over the VA, but there are some bad apples that harm the entire system. An individual had to go to jail, but was able to take time off and come back to work. An individual was found drunk and actually performed surgery. A psychiatrist was actually working with a veteran but watching inappropriate videos as he was performing the work that he was supposed to do. But none of those individuals could be fired. None of those individuals would survive anywhere in the private sector or anywhere else. This will empower the VA secretary to get rid of the bad apples so the good employees could actually rise to the occasion and make sure we care for our VAs, make sure we care for our veterans. It will also protect whistleblowers so they can actually bring forward those places that are not doing well inside the VA, and we can solve this problem once and for all.
Will the president sign that bill?
The president is tweeting, waiting for this bill to get to him.
Okay.
And so we will move it off the floor of the House today. And you know what? We'll set another record for more bills being signed by a president in this time frame since H.W. Bush.
It's important stuff. Thank you for your time. Kevin McCarthy from earlier. Right now, there is breaking news from the Associated Press by way of Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State. He is now saying that the North Koreans have released Otto Warmbier from jail in North Korea. Wow, if that is the case, this young man has been saved 15 years hard labor in North Korea. He's from the University of Virginia. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the community of Wyoming. His family has been caught between going public and staying private, worried day after day and hour after hour about their son's fate. But according to the Associated Press, North Korea has released the jailed American student Otto Warmbier, according to the Secretary of State. Boy, let's hope and pray that is the case. Dennis Rodman is in North Korea as we speak. Was there a connection? There could have been, but we're waiting more details on this. It's just crossing the wires right now, so we're trying to reach out to the family and get in touch with them.
Yeah,
wow.
We know that Secretary Tillerson is right now in the middle of some remarks that he's giving with another Saudi Arabian leader, and so apparently that's where this comes from. We'll track it down. All right, as we await the Jeff Sessions hearing later today, the Attorney General facing a dizzying array of questions about his role in the campaign, Russia, and much more.
Did you know that silver is considered one of the world's most useful commodities, second only to oil?
Can help you find clear skin that lasts.
9:35, Washington, D.C. The AG, Jeff Sessions, is not the only one on the hot seat today. We are monitoring numerous hearings. Defense Secretary Mattis, Joint Chiefs Chairman Dunford, they'll testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee. Next hour, Secretary of State Tillerson appears before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Both hearings expected to cover President Trump's budget, but we're also likely to get a number of questions about this Russia matter and the firing of the former FBI Director James Comey. So stand by. We're on all of that for you today on America's Newsroom.
A very busy day in Washington over on Capitol Hill. We are awaiting that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein hearing. He's going to sit down with the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee. It's supposed to be about funding, but we're guessing it's going to go into a lot of other territory. His boss, Jeff Sessions, testifies to the Senate Intelligence Committee later this afternoon in an open hearing, and there's no denying the hot water we'll be wading into. He's going to be wading into it. Let's bring in Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Good to see you, Judge.
Morning, Shannon.
All right, you said yesterday this was a dangerous position for him to be in, testifying under oath and in open setting now. How do you feel today?
I feel the same way today because he is not testifying as the person in charge of these criminal investigations and intelligence investigations. He's testifying as a witness, and he has three issues to concern himself with: the President of the United States, who appointed him, the Justice Department, which he still heads, though, even though he's not responsible for these investigations, and himself, because the Democrats are going to come out very hard and very strong and accuse him of perjury because of the, what I think was honest misunderstanding of the nature of a question about his relationship with Ambassador Kislyak, which in my view was harmless and routine. Nevertheless, the answer he gave about how many times he met or was acquainted with or came across Ambassador Kislyak, he gave the answer under oath, and it's inconsistent with the factual record. So right off the bat, his back's going to be to the wall. What does he do when there's a conflict in his brain about how do I answer this question? It could help me, it could hurt the Justice Department, it could help the Justice Department and hurt the President. This is why I've advised that it's a tricky situation for him. He's a very bright lawyer. He's a former senator. He knows how these things go, but it's fraught with danger.
Okay, so the White House yesterday kind of demurred on the issue of executive privilege, of whether or not he would try to claim that. They said it depends on the questions and where they go. Nearly every administration, I mean, dating back to George Washington, has used some form of this idea of executive privilege. It wouldn't be unusual.
All right, executive privilege is the ability of the President of the United States, directly or through people with whom he interacts, to refrain from revealing communications involving military, diplomatic, or sensitive national security matters. It would be very odd, Shannon, for the Attorney General, who asked for an open public hearing, to decline to answer some questions on the basis of executive privilege. I don't expect that to happen. If it does, I think it's going to be damaging for him or for the President, because the perception will be, this may not be the reality, but the perception will be he or the President have something to hide, after they asked for a public hearing.
You know, our colleague, Greg Jarrett, and also an attorney, we're going to start a firm. But anyway, it would be, you know, based out of Fox. He has written some excellent pieces in recent weeks, pointing out a lot of the, you know, technicalities of what's going on here. He has a piece out that talks about the conflict of interest, potentially, that Special Counsel Mueller has now with respect to Comey, their close relationship. He really details that and says, essentially, there's no way he can be objective, and really, if he was going to do the right thing, he should recuse himself. What do you think?
I view it differently. From my own experience with law enforcement, prosecutors are not neutral. Prosecutors believe that their targets are guilty and their job is to amass evidence against them. And prosecutors also become friends with the police or the FBI agents who investigate their cases and then testify as witnesses. Judges have to remain neutral and in an ivory tower and should not be evaluating the credibility of evidence that comes out of the mouth of a close friend. Prosecutors, it's a different story.
But what if he stumbled upon something that he thought, as many people are arguing, the leak of this memo could be wrongdoing on the part of former FBI Director James Comey? What would the special counsel do with that?
I don't know what he would do with it, but he would be duty-bound to bring it to Rod Rosenstein, who's the number 2 person in the Justice Department and his boss on these issues. He may very well be duty-bound to investigate James Comey, who right now appears to be one of his witnesses, maybe his star witness. But if the witness has defects, as a lot of witnesses do, and the government prosecutors learn that, they have to do something with it. They either have to reveal it, investigate it, or get off the case.
All right, nearly every witness, I think we know, has some kind of flaw that you've got to deal with in this process. All right, Judge, good to see you.
We'll be watching this thing this afternoon.
Kicks off special coverage 2 o'clock.
Unless Dennis Rodman intercedes.
We got a little more on that right now. The Associated Press breaking this news 10 minutes ago. This young man on screen, Otto Warmbier, has apparently been released from a prison in North Korea, according to the AP. Rex Tillerson, in prepared remarks that we should get in, what, about 20 minutes from now? That's our guess as he testifies on Capitol Hill. Secretary Tillerson says that Warmbier is on his way back to the United States, said to be reunited with his family. In that statement, he says the State Department secured his release after the direction of President Donald Trump. Tillerson, as the State Department continues talking about 3 other detained Americans with North Korea. It also comes again as the former NBA player Dennis Rodman is paying a visit to North Korea. He's been there before. Warmbier, University of Virginia student, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the community of Wyoming. You might remember that tearful confession and apology that he gave on camera shortly before he was led away to the prison camp. The rumor was that Warmbier was picked up at the airport while leaving Pyongyang with reports of a stolen state poster in his suitcase. The other report from the family is that he merely touched a poster on the wall in his hotel room. Whatever the truth might be, according to Secretary Tillerson, Otto Warmbier is yet again a free man. And what a great day that is. Stand by. More when we get it right here. Shannon.
Amazing. All right, we are waiting the sort of several hearings. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein first up, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions. They're going to have to answer questions about the Russia probe and the firing of James Comey. Senator Rand Paul on those topics and much more next.
This is just investigations for its own sake and to produce a lot of smoke. The President has contributed, you're right, with the tweets, but so far, up until now, and I'm open to evidence, it's all smoke.
I tried hard to quit smoking. But when we brought our daughter home.
And they shouldn't be so visible in the middle of a presidential election. So
What role, if any, did he have in firing James Comey? Clear it up. From your perspective, what's important now?
But, you know, I think that it was time for Comey to go. I don't think there's been any FBI director who ever politicized the department more than he did. Every Democrat in the land thought he went too far in being vocal about what Clinton did, and every Republican in the land thought if all the things he said about her were true, why didn't he indict her? So he really made nobody happy. But your FBI agents shouldn't be having press conferences all the time. They shouldn't be talking about politics, and they shouldn't be so visible in the middle of a presidential election. So I think he made a lot of mistakes, and it was time for him to move on.
With regard to whether the president can do it, absolutely. The president has the absolute authority. You work for the president at his will. The president can fire you for any reason. And I think even Comey's testimony kind of vindicated the president, because Comey said, look, he told me he hoped I would end the investigation. That doesn't really sound like strong-arming to me, to say you hope that he'll be done and finish his job. If there is no investigation of the president, tell the people. So that's the most important part of this that came out for me, is that Comey confirmed that there was no, and as far as he knows, there is no investigation of the president.
And Jeff Sessions has a chance to defend. We haven't heard from him yet, and that's a big part of the story. I think we can all concede that. So that comes up later today. Topic number 2, Obamacare on screen. Here's the map. Individual market premiums. You can see the various states. Utah's up 101, Wyoming's up 107, South Dakota 124, Arkansas 120, Tennessee 176. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
It's out of control.
I know you want full repeal. Will you accept anything less than that?
The main thing is that you will not get prices to go down if you keep the Obamacare regulations. The regulations add to the price, and the regulations are what caused the adverse or the death spiral of Obamacare. The Republican plan from the House doesn't fix the death spiral, just subsidizes it, throws a whole bunch of federal taxpayer money in there. But what they don't really explain to you is there is no federal money up here. We're $500 billion in the hole every year. We have a $20 trillion debt. Where does all this money come from to stabilize insurance? And I frankly don't want to give any money to insurance companies. They make $15 billion a year. Why would the taxpayer give them a penny? So I'm not for that, and I hope the Senate plan will be different.
Yeah, this is very important stuff, but without getting too far in the details, do you think, given the composition of the Senate today, knowing Republicans have a 2-vote majority, can you get it passed or not today?
My current impression is they've taken the House bill, and it's probably going to include more subsidies, probably going to include more federal money and more federal involvement in health care. That's the wrong direction, and that will lose me. But I'm still in the mix. I'm still open to voting for something, but it's got to get better, not worse. The House bill would have to improve, not get worse.
Sounds like you have a big meeting with Mitch McConnell coming up. We will stand by for that. The reason you came on today is you're opposed to the $350 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia. Why?
Number one, the Saudis have been funding terrorism. Hillary Clinton, in one of her emails to John Podesta, said, we've got to put pressure on the Saudis because they're supplying financial and logistical help to ISIS. This is the Secretary of State saying this, that Saudis were funding ISIS and we're going to give them weapons. The other more immediate cause now is the Saudis are bombing the heck out of Yemen, the country to the south of them. 17 million people are on the verge of starvation in Yemen. Saudis have blockaded the ports. Yemen gets 90% of its food from outside the country. It is really a terrible idea for the United States to get involved in another war, and it's really terrible for us to be allied with someone that's getting ready to, there's an impending famine in Yemen, and I can't be a part of that.
Okay, can you block it, yes or no?
We may win today. This is going to surprise a lot of people. It's going to be very close.
Senator, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky.
Breaking news, American University student Otto Warmbier will be released from a North Korean prison. We are getting more details and confirmation of exactly what's happening. A live report with the latest just ahead.